Spiritual connection first, then the miracle of alien reproduction. Nova Harrison hadn't expected to find enlightenment among the crystalline spires of Lemuria. But as she watched the twin moons rise over the iridescent horizon, she knew her life would never be the same. The meditation research facility gleamed like polished opal, its surfaces refracting the ethereal light in ways that seemed to defy physics. "Your neural patterns are extraordinary," remarked Talix, the Lemurian scientist observing her meditation session. His translucent skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns that Nova had learned indicated intense curiosity. "I've never seen a human achieve such deep resonance with our crystals." Nova opened her eyes slowly, maintaining the peaceful state she'd cultivated. "On Earth, we have a saying, 'The universe speaks to those who learn to listen.'" She smiled, noting how the crystalline walls pulsed in harmony with her words. "Though I admit, the universe has never spoken quite so literally before." Talix moved closer, his tall, willowy form graceful despite the planet's lower gravity. The research center had been established to study human Lemurian compatibility, particularly in regards to reproduction. The Lemurians' declining birth rates had forced them to look beyond their crystal world for solutions, though few expected anything meaningful to come from studying humans. "Your meditation techniques," Talix continued, his voice carrying harmonic undertones that made the air vibrate pleasantly. "They seem to activate neural pathways similar to our reproductive bonding process." He paused, crystal-faceted eyes, studying her with scientific intensity. "Would you be willing to participate in a more extensive study?" Nova considered the request. She'd come to Lemuria as part of the first wave of human spiritual advisors, hoping to bridge the gap between their species through shared mindfulness practices. The possibility of helping solve the Lemurians' reproductive crisis hadn't been part of her plan, but something about Talix's presence resonated with her on a level beyond the physical. "What would this study involve?" she asked, watching as the patterns beneath his skin shifted to show appreciation for her interest. "Our reproduction requires a deep spiritual connection between partners," Talix explained, activating a holographic display that showed intricate neural patterns. "The physical aspect is secondary to the mental and spiritual bond. But in recent generations, fewer Lemurians have been able to achieve the necessary depth of connection. Your meditation appears to activate similar neural pathways naturally." Nova stood, her simple white meditation robes catching the light. "You think human meditation techniques might help Lemurians reconnect with their spiritual sides?" "Perhaps more," Talix admitted, his skin patterns shifting to show both excitement and hesitation. "The resonance you achieve, it's theoretically compatible with our bonding process." The implications hung in the air between them. Nova felt her pulse quicken, though her meditation training helped her maintain outward calm. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? Cross-species reproduction has never been successful," Talix said carefully, "but no human has ever demonstrated your level of spiritual attunement. The potential for breakthrough research is significant." Nova watched the crystal walls pulse in sync with their conversation, remembering how she'd always felt drawn to the stars, to the possibility of something more waiting in the cosmos. "I came here to build bridges between our peoples," she said thoughtfully. "I suppose this would be quite the bridge." Talix's skin rippled with what Nova had learned was laughter. "Indeed, though the scientific council may need some convincing. They're rather traditional in their views." "Then we'll have to show them something extraordinary," Nova replied, feeling the crystal chamber resonate with her determination. "When do we begin?" Their first official research session began the next morning. The laboratory's crystal walls had been specifically tuned to measure and amplify spiritual resonance. Nova sat cross-legged on a floating platform, facing Talix, who had assumed a similar position. "The key," he explained, his voice carrying those musical undertones that seemed to bypass her ears and speak directly to her soul, "is achieving perfect harmony between our energy fields. Normally, this would be impossible between different species, but your meditation creates bridges where none existed before." Nova finished, understanding dawning. She closed her eyes, centering herself as she'd done thousands of times before. But this time, she opened her awareness to include Talix's presence, the unique resonance of his being. The crystal walls began to pulse with new patterns, recording the unprecedented interaction between human and Lemurian consciousness. Talix's sharp intake of breath told Nova something extraordinary was happening, but she maintained her focus, allowing the connection to develop naturally. "Remarkable," Talix whispered, his voice carrying waves of wonder that rippled through their growing bond. "Your consciousness, it's adapting, harmonizing with Lemurian energy patterns in ways we thought impossible." Nova felt it too, a deep resonance building between them, transcending physical form to touch something more fundamental. The crystal chamber sang with new frequencies, recording patterns that would later revolutionize their understanding of interspecies connection. Little did they know, their groundbreaking session was being monitored by more than just the laboratory's instruments. In the upper levels of the facility, members of the scientific council watched with a mixture of amazement and concern. The implications of their discovery would soon shake the foundations of both human and Lemurian society. News of Nova and Talix's breakthroughs spread through the research facility like ripples in a crystal pool. Their morning sessions had become the subject of intense scientific interest, with more sophisticated monitoring equipment being installed daily to capture every aspect of their unprecedented spiritual connection. "Your neural patterns are becoming more synchronized," observed Dr. Lizara, the facility's lead researcher. Her crystalline form shifted with professional curiosity as she studied the holographic readouts. "The harmony you achieve, it shouldn't be possible between different species." Nova sat beside Talix in the observation chamber, both still floating in the afterglow of their morning meditation. The connection between them had grown stronger with each session, creating resonance patterns that made the facility's crystal walls sing with new frequencies. "Perhaps we've been limiting ourselves," Talix suggested, his skin patterns rippling with thoughtful intensity. "Focusing too much on physical compatibility and not enough on spiritual harmony." Nova felt the truth in his words, along with something deeper that neither of them had dared name yet. Their spiritual connection had begun generating physical responses, subtle changes in their body chemistry that the instruments eagerly recorded. The crystal walls pulsed in sync with their shared energy, creating patterns that hadn't been seen in generations. "The Council is concerned," Lizar admitted, her form shifting to show diplomatic caution. "What you're achieving here, it challenges our most basic assumptions about reproduction and species boundaries. Isn't that exactly what we need?" Nova asked, feeling Talix's silent support through their strengthening bond. "Your birth rates have been declining for generations. Maybe it's time to consider that the old boundaries need to be re-examined." Before Lizara could respond, the chamber's crystals flared with warning light. Senior council member Raxon swept in, his ancient form barely containing his agitation. The patterns beneath his skin swirled with traditional warning signs, marks that had historically been used to denote genetic impurity. "This experiment has gone far enough," he declared, his harmonics sharp with disapproval. "You're disrupting patterns that have existed for millennia. The spiritual pollution must not be allowed to continue." Nova felt Talix tense beside her, his protective instincts flaring through their bond. The crystal walls responded to their combined emotion, creating interference patterns that made Raxon's form waver slightly. "With respect, council member," Talix spoke carefully, "the patterns we're generating aren't pollution. They're evolution. The ancient texts speak of connections that transcend physical form. What if this is what they meant?" Raxon's crystalline surface fractured slightly with disdain. "The texts speak of spiritual harmony between Lemurians, not whatever this is. The council demands an immediate end to these sessions." Nova stood, her meditation training helping her maintain calm despite the confrontation. "The crystals themselves disagree with you, council member." She gestured to the walls, which were indeed pulsing with patterns that seemed to support their connection. "They recognize something you refuse to see. The human speaks truth, came a new voice, melodic and ancient. Elder Syrinx entered the chamber, her crystalline form carrying the wisdom of centuries. As the facility's spiritual advisor, her word carried significant weight. I've been monitoring their sessions. The patterns they generate, they match prophecies older than our current understanding. The chamber fell silent, even Raxon showing deference to the elder's presence. Syrinx moved closer to Nova and Talix, her form refracting light in ways that created mesmerizing patterns. In the earliest days, she continued, before we retreated into our crystal towers and forgot the true meaning of connection, our ancestors spoke of bridges between stars, of harmonies that would transcend the physical to create something entirely new. Her gaze settled on Nova. They spoke of ones who would come from beyond, carrying ancient wisdom in new forms. The implications hung in the air like crystal chimes. Nova felt Talix's hope and fear through their bond, along with something deeper that grew stronger with each passing day. Their connection had moved beyond mere research, becoming something neither of them had expected, but both increasingly desired. The Council cannot ignore prophecy, Syrinx declared, her tone carrying finality. These sessions will continue, under my direct supervision. Perhaps it's time we remembered that growth often requires stepping beyond comfortable boundaries. Raxon left in barely concealed fury, but Nova hardly noticed. Her attention was focused on Talix, whose skin patterns had shifted to show a complex mix of relief, joy, and another emotion that made the crystals sing with new intensity. Later, in their private research chamber, Talix finally gave voice to what they'd both been feeling. This connection between us, it's become more than research, hasn't it? Nova nodded, watching the crystal walls pulse in harmony with their shared emotion. I think it always was. We just needed time to recognize it. Their spiritual bond flared with newfound acknowledgement, creating patterns in the crystal chamber that would later be studied by generations of researchers. They had indeed built a bridge between worlds, though neither of them had expected it to manifest quite so personally. As the twin moons rose outside, casting their iridescent light through the crystal walls, Nova and Talix began to understand that their discovery might change more than just scientific understanding. They were forging a path that could transform both their societies if they had the courage to follow it to its natural conclusion. The meditation chamber erupted in light, crystal walls blazing with unprecedented intensity as Nova and Talix's spiritual energies merged completely for the first time. Under Elder Syrinx's supervision, they had pushed past previous limitations, achieving a level of harmony that sent shockwaves through the entire facility. By the ancient stars, Syrinx breathed, her crystalline form vibrating with wonder. The legends spoke of this, but to actually witness it, the monitoring equipment struggled to process the data streaming from their connection. Through their strengthened bond, Nova felt Talix's exhilaration mix with her own. The barriers between their consciousness had dissolved, creating something entirely new, a shared awareness that transcended species. Most remarkably, their combined energy had begun generating physical changes in both their bodies. Their cellular structures are adapting, Dr. Lazara reported, studying the readings with increasing excitement. Nova's neural pathways are developing crystalline aspects, while Talix's bioluminescence has adopted human rhythms. They're achieving genuine physiological compatibility. The implications were staggering. Not only had they proven that human-Lumerian spiritual connections were possible, but their bond was literally transforming them at a biological level. It suggested possibilities that even the most optimistic researchers hadn't dared imagine. However, their breakthrough brought swift reaction. Council member Raxon arrived with a delegation of traditionalists, their crystalline forms rigid with disapproval. "This abomination must end," he declared. "You're corrupting the very essence of what it means to be Lumerian." "No," Talix responded, his voice carrying new harmonics that made the crystals sing. "We're remembering what it truly means." He stood protectively near Nova, their energies remaining intertwined. "Look at the patterns we generate. They match the most ancient prophecies exactly." Elder Syrinx moved to support them, her ancient wisdom lending weight to their case. The decline in our birth rates isn't just a physical problem, she explained. It's a symptom of our spiritual stagnation. We've become too rigid, too focused on maintaining what we think is purity. Nova felt a surge of inspiration through their bond. Show them, she suggested privately to Talix. He understood immediately, their shared consciousness allowing perfect coordination. Together, they began a demonstration of their combined abilities. The crystal chamber responded to their harmonized energy, creating displays of light and sound that hadn't been seen in millennia. Ancient patterns emerged spontaneously in the walls, telling stories of a time when Lumerians were more connected to the cosmic consciousness. Impossible, whispered one of Raxon's supporters, watching as Nova and Talix's merged energy field generated new crystal growth, something that had become increasingly rare in recent generations. Not impossible, Lizara corrected, her scientific excitement overcoming traditional restraint. They're achieving what our ancestors described: perfect spiritual harmony leading to physical creation. Their bond isn't just compatible with our biology, it's actively strengthening it. The evidence was undeniable. Under the influence of their combined energy, the facility's crystals showed unprecedented vitality. Even some of the traditionalists' forms began resonating unconsciously with the harmonies Nova and Talix generated. Raxon, however, remained unmoved. The Council will not sanction this departure from tradition. If you persist with these experiments, there will be consequences. The only consequence of stopping, Elder Syrinx countered, would be the continued decline of our people. Look around you, Raxon. When was the last time you saw our crystals shine with such life? The standoff was interrupted by an urgent alert from the monitoring equipment. Dr. Lizara's form pulsed with shock as she analyzed the readings. The changes in their cellular structure, they're stabilizing into something new, something viable. Nova and Talix shared a moment of profound understanding through their bond. They had suspected this might be possible, but having scientific confirmation changed everything. Their connection hadn't just bridged their differences, it had forged a path toward genuine biological compatibility. The ancient texts, Elder Syrinx said softly, speak of a time when evolution would require us to reach beyond our crystal towers. They say that true growth often comes from embracing the unknown rather than clinging to the familiar. The chamber hummed with tension as Raxon struggled between dogma and the undeniable evidence before him. Finally, he spoke. The full council must be convened. This development requires careful consideration. After the traditionalists departed, Nova and Talix remained in the chamber, their energies still harmoniously merged. Through their bond, they shared thoughts of future possibilities, not just for their peoples, but for themselves. They'll try to stop us, Nova observed, watching the crystal walls pulse in rhythm with their combined consciousness. They'll fail, Talix responded with quiet certainty. What we've discovered here is bigger than tradition. It's evolution itself. Elder Syrinx, who had remained behind, studied them with ancient wisdom. The path you've opened will change everything, she said. Are you prepared for what that means? Nova felt Talix's answer mirror her own through their connection. They had moved beyond preparation into acceptance, beyond research into destiny. The crystals sang with the rightness of their choice, creating patterns that wrote their future in light. The news spread across both worlds like wildfire. Human and Lumerian biology could be harmonized through spiritual connection. Nova watched from the facility's observation deck as another transport arrived, carrying more human meditation practitioners eager to explore what she and Talix had discovered. The first group of candidates shows promising compatibility readings, Talix reported, his crystalline form shimmering with excitement as he joined her. Their bond hummed between them, now a constant presence that made separation feel incomplete. Elder Syrinx believes several of them might achieve preliminary resonance within weeks rather than months. Nova smiled, feeling his joy mirror her own. Because they're coming with open minds and hearts, we've shown it's possible. That's half the battle. The crystal walls pulsed in agreement, their patterns more vibrant than ever under the influence of multiple human-Lumerian connections forming throughout the facility. Dr. Lazara approached, her form dancing with scientific excitement. "The Council's preliminary report is ready," she announced. "The evidence of cellular regeneration in both species is unprecedented. Your combined energy field isn't just enabling compatibility. It's actively improving the baseline health of everyone exposed to it." This had been their most surprising discovery. The harmonics generated by human-Lumerian spiritual bonds seemed to resonate with something fundamental in both species, awakening dormant potential. Even traditional Lumerians who initially opposed the research couldn't deny feeling more energized in the presence of these new connections. "The Earth delegation arrives tomorrow," Nova reminded them, watching another crystal spire spontaneously grow from the facility's walls, a phenomenon that had become increasingly common as more humans and Lumerians explored spiritual bonding. "Are we ready for this to go public?" Before Talix could respond, a commotion erupted in the main chamber. Council member Raxon had returned, but this time he wasn't alone. A group of Earth officials accompanied him, their expressions ranging from concern to outright hostility. "This has gone far enough," announced Director Pierce from the Earth Diplomatic Corps. "We cannot allow unauthorized genetic manipulation of human subjects, regardless of the supposed benefits." Nova felt Talix's protective instinct flare through their bond. "There's no manipulation involved," she stated firmly, stepping forward. "Only voluntary spiritual connection that allows natural adaptation." Natural. Raxon's form crackled with skepticism. "There is nothing natural about humans developing crystalline neural structures or Lumerians adopting human biological rhythms." Dr. Lazara intervened, her scientific authority evident in her bearing. "With respect, Council member, our research suggests these changes are actually a return to more natural states. Both species show signs of having once been more adaptable. Our rigid categories may be the real artificial construct." The chamber's crystals hummed in harmony with her words, displaying ancient patterns that seemed to support this theory. Elder Syrinx had discovered references in the oldest texts to a time when consciousness flowed more freely between different forms of life. "Evolution isn't just about physical change," Nova explained, drawing strength from her bond with Talix. "It's about expanding consciousness, discovering new ways of being. What we've achieved here isn't just about reproduction. It's about remembering what's possible when we move beyond our limitations." Director Pierce frowned. "And the children? What of the hybrid offspring these unions might produce?" "Our simulations suggest they would represent the best of both species," Dr. Lazara answered. "Enhanced spiritual sensitivity combined with human adaptability. Crystalline resilience with human creativity." Nova felt a ripple of emotion through her bond with Talix at these words. They hadn't discussed it explicitly, but both knew they were approaching the point where theory would become reality. Their connection had deepened beyond research, beyond even the profound spiritual bond they pioneered. Something new was growing between them, something that would change everything. "The public will never accept this," Raxon declared, but his conviction seemed to waver as he watched new crystal formations spontaneously emerge around Nova and Talix. "They already are." Elder Syrinx's voice carried ancient wisdom as she entered the chamber. "Look around you. Every successful bonding generates healing energy that benefits all. The crystals grow stronger, the people more vibrant. We're witnessing the beginning of a transformation that was prophesied millennia ago." The Earth officials shifted uncomfortably as the crystal walls pulsed with increasing intensity, responding to the growing number of human-Lumerian connections throughout the facility. It was becoming harder to deny that something extraordinary was happening. "Perhaps," Director Pierce said slowly, "we should focus on establishing proper protocols rather than trying to prevent the inevitable." Nova felt Talix's relief mirror her own. Through their bond, they shared a vision of the future, one where the boundaries between species dissolved not through force, but through spiritual evolution, creating something greater than either had been alone. Later, In their private chamber, Nova and Talix allowed their energies to merge completely. The crystal walls sang with joy, creating patterns that spoke of new life and infinite possibility. "They'll adjust," Talix assured her, his form shimmering with love. "Just as we did. Change is frightening, but it's also necessary." Nova nodded, feeling their combined consciousness expand to encompass new awareness. "The real question isn't whether they'll accept it," she replied, "but whether we're ready for what comes next." Through their bond, they both knew the answer. The next phase of their journey together would challenge more than just social conventions. It would redefine what was possible when love transcended the boundaries of form itself. The birthing chamber pulsed with unprecedented energy as Nova's time drew near. The crystal walls sang with frequencies never before recorded, responding to the unique life force growing within her. Talix hadn't left her side for days, their spiritual bond now so complete that separation seemed unthinkable. "The harmonics are extraordinary," Dr. Lazara whispered, monitoring the readings with wonder. "The child's energy signature combines elements of both species in ways we never imagined possible." Elder Syrinx stood nearby, her ancient form radiating approval as she supervised the historic moment. Throughout Nova's pregnancy, the facility had documented remarkable changes in both parents. Nova's skin had developed subtle crystalline patterns that shimmered in the light, while Talix's bioluminescence had adapted to match human biological rhythms perfectly. "The prophecies spoke of a bridge between worlds," Syrinx reminded them, "but even I never understood they meant it quite so literally." Nova smiled through another wave of energy fluctuations, feeling Talix's strength flow into her through their bond. Their child's consciousness was already distinct in their shared awareness, a brilliant new harmony that incorporated both human and Lumerian aspects seamlessly. The chamber's crystals flared suddenly, responding to a surge in Nova's energy field. "It's time," she breathed, feeling the culmination of their journey approaching. Council member Raxon had insisted on being present for the birth, though his opposition had softened over the months as he witnessed the positive changes spreading through Lumerian society. The success of other human Lumerian pairs following Nova and Talix's example had become impossible to ignore. "Remember what we discovered," Talix murmured, supporting Nova both physically and spiritually. "Let the connection guide us." Nova nodded, slipping into the deep meditative state they perfected together. Their combined consciousness expanded, creating a nurturing space for what was to come. The crystal chamber responded, generating patterns that hadn't been seen since the earliest days of Lumerian civilization. "The entire facility is resonating," Dr. Lazara reported in awe. "Every crystal structure within a kilometer is amplifying their energy." The birth itself transcended traditional understanding of both human and Lumerian reproduction. Nova and Talix's perfectly synchronized spiritual bond guided the process, their merged energy fields supporting their child's emergence into physical form. The chamber's crystals pulsed in rhythm with each development, their light creating a cocoon of harmonic resonance. When their daughter finally arrived, her first cry carried harmonics that made every crystal in the facility chime in response. Her skin was opalescent, showing both human and crystalline properties, and her eyes held depths that seemed to reflect both stars and spirit. "She's perfect," Nova whispered, feeling their child's consciousness naturally join their family bond. The baby's energy signature was unlike anything ever recorded, a true blend of both species that suggested possibilities beyond anyone's expectations. "Remarkable," Raxon admitted, his traditional skepticism finally crumbling in the face of undeniable miracle. "Her vital signs are stronger than any Lumerian infant in generations." Dr. Lazara could barely contain her excitement as she reviewed the medical data. "The hybridization is stable at every level, physical, mental, and spiritual. She's not just viable, she's thriving." "What will you name her?" Elder Syrinx asked, approaching to bless the child in ancient tradition. Nova and Talix shared a moment of perfect understanding through their bond. "Astria," they answered together. "It means of the stars in ancient Earth language, and sounds like the Lumerian word for new beginning." Little Astria opened her eyes fully, revealing irises that shifted between human browns and Lemurian crystal facets. Her awareness touched their shared consciousness with surprising strength, already showing signs of enhanced spiritual sensitivity. She'll be the first of many, Elder Syrinx predicted, watching the child's natural bioluminescence create patterns that matched the chamber's crystal harmonics, a living bridge between our peoples. The news of Astria's successful birth spread rapidly through both human and Lemurian societies. She became a symbol of what was possible when artificial boundaries were transcended through spiritual connection. Other human Lemurian couples, already following the path Nova and Talix had pioneered, found renewed hope in their success. In the days that followed, both Earth and Lemuria had to adjust their definitions of family and species. New protocols were established, guided by the wisdom that Nova and Talix's journey had revealed. The Reproduction Education Center expanded, incorporating meditation techniques that helped other couples achieve the spiritual harmony necessary for successful bonding. "We've started something revolutionary," Nova observed one evening, watching Astria sleep in a cradle of living crystal that had grown spontaneously to nurture her unique needs. Talix nodded, his form shimmering with joy as their family bond hummed with perfect harmony. "Not started," he corrected gently. "Remembered." The ability was always there, waiting for someone to bridge the gap between what was and what could be. The crystal walls pulsed softly, their patterns telling stories of past and future, of barriers overcome and new horizons discovered. In Astria's peaceful, sleek glow, they saw the promise of a future where consciousness flowed freely between stars and species, guided by the timeless wisdom that love transcends all forms. The ancient prophecies had been fulfilled, but in ways no one had quite expected. Through their courage to explore beyond traditional boundaries, Nova and Talix had helped both their peoples remember that the greatest miracles often come from simply opening one's heart to new possibilities. As Lemuria's twin moons rose outside their chamber, their light refracting through the crystal walls to create rainbow patterns across Astria's opalescent skin, Nova and Talix shared a moment of profound gratitude. They had set out to solve a reproductive crisis and ended up transforming two civilizations, proving that the path to evolution often led through the heart.
Like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell. Your support means the world to me and helps me keep creating amazing content for you.